Welcome, everyone. I'm Heather from Tiller, and I'm joined by my colleagues Ashley and Tulani. They're going to help me run this webinar. So thanks for joining us today. So we're going to talk about how to build a strong financial foundation with Tiller. And we're going to do a little bit of housekeeping first before we get into all of that. So what this session is going to look like today is first how to think about a strong financial foundation. What the heck does that even mean? Then we'll kind of demo like tying it together, those concepts. We're going to look back at 2025 in just a demo sheet with some example data that we have. And then we're going to tie what we look back at into how does that help us build a plan for 2026, and then the mechanics of getting your spreadsheet ready for 2026. Because there are some steps there that if you want to keep using the same spreadsheet, that you're going to want to take in that spreadsheet, especially if you use that spreadsheet for budgeting specifically. And then we'll also talk a little bit about, what we've been focused on this year from a product perspective, the core of Tiller, and what the core job that we do for people, helping them get their bank data in the spreadsheets, and then how we're trying to make that better. And then we hope to have about 15 to 20 minutes for Q&A at the end. And so in that Q&A section, please just use the Q&A button specifically. There's a button down there in the Zoom controls where you can add your question. So be sure to use the Q&A button because that will help make sure it gets in the right place. You can ask the question at any point during the session. Doesn't have to be just in the Q&A portion. Tulane is going to be here answering questions live, typing out the answers, so feel free to go ahead and get your questions in at any point. And we'll try to take as many questions at the end as we can, but we don't usually get through all of the questions in this session. So you'll get an email tomorrow with a link to some resources, which will include all of the Q&A questions as well as the answers to those questions in like a written format. And that'll also have a link to the recording of this session, as well as other resources that we talk about during the session. So like help articles that are relevant to the different topics and features that we're discussing in the session. So let's go ahead and dive into what is a strong financial foundation, right? So we're heading into the new year, and this is always an opportunity to reflect and just see if there are any changes that we would want to make with our finances. Are there insights that we can uncover, even if we feel like we have a strong financial foundation? I really love this time of year. I think if you read the blog post that came out when we announced that we were doing this webinar, I was just kind of sharing how it's this time of reflecting about our money and reflecting on what we've achieved over the year, both like personal level and financial level. But it's also just a time to connect with so many of our customers. And I've run this webinar for so many years now that I just really enjoy getting to do this with you all. So thank you for letting me do it for so many years. I'm passing the torch over to Ashley, who is our new customer success manager. So I'll be really excited to have her leading this in the future years, or someone on the CS team leading this. I'm transitioning to the product manager role here at Tiller. So I've just really enjoyed doing this with you all over the last several years. And so it's this time that I get to reflect, right? Like on my own money, because I use Tiller, I'm an avid Tiller user, as well as just helping you all reflect in this session. And so as we think about this concept of a strong financial foundation, like what it is, what if we don't have a strong financial foundation? Or what if we don't know if we do? Maybe we do, but we just don't know. And so the first step in this is really just awareness, or this ability to see and to know something clearly. And so I love this quote from Martin Luther King Jr. Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. Um, it's just this idea that like we're not going to make a change until we look at what's there, until we build the awareness about it, what is there. And so what does awareness look like in a financial context? So financial awareness is just knowing what's happening with your money right now and recognizing what it means without really needing to judge it or try to change it. You're just trying to understand what's happening. And so we believe that financial awareness empowers you to answer these types of questions. Where are you spending your money? How much are you earning each month? What is your basic monthly cash flow? Do you have enough saved for an emergency fund? If you have consumer debt, do you have a pay down plan for that debt? Are you putting enough towards saving for your future or your children's future? What is the timing of the money moving in and out of your accounts? And what are the trade-offs that you're making toward your financial goals? Because every time we're out there spending money that's maybe on things that we don't necessarily need, it is a trade-off that we're making towards those future goals that we have with our money. So this financial awareness helps us answer those questions. It helps us know what's going on with our money so that we can have the power to do something about it should we choose to do that. So I'm going to let Ashley talk about how Tiller helps you build this awareness.
Yeah, so Tiller has a few features that are really, really helpful, specifically around the awareness piece. The first thing is that it starts with control over your categories. So you decide how your money's organized, and this is really foundational to understanding where your money's going. You have full ownership and control over your categories in Tiller, so it's up to you how specific or how general you want to make those. The next piece is that all of your transactions live in one place in the same format. So whether your data is coming from a bank account that you've linked or a manual import that you've done with a CSV file, Tiller's going to bring everything together so you see the full picture of your money without having to jump between apps or all your different banking websites to get the big picture of your info. With all that data in one place in your Tiller spreadsheet, you're naturally empowered to understand your cash flow. So you can really clearly see what's coming in, what's going out, and then how those patterns might change over time. Tiller also gives you great visibility into balances and history. So watching your account balances over time is going to make it easier to monitor your progress with savings, to spot trends, and to notice any issues before they might become problems. And then because Tiller is built on a spreadsheet, you get an incredible amount of flexibility with that data. So you have the ultimate control to dig into that data, build on top of what's already there. So whether that's adding new calculations, views, or insights, it's really up to you how you want to look at that. But we don't make you start from scratch with that data. So we provide you with templates and tools. So if you're not super tech savvy with spreadsheets, we've got you covered with the foundation template. And the community has also contributed a ton. So you can learn from what others have built and then adapt those templates to your own needs. So the sky's really the limit when it comes to how you want to look at your data. And then the last piece here is that Tiller supports workflows that help you automate those essential tasks. So it's giving you the freedom to explore your data, but making you spend way less time on the manual work and more time just using that data to make informed and confident financial decisions. So now I'll hand it back over to Heather to do a bit of the demo.
Awesome. Thanks, Ashley. Yeah, I think it's just, to me, it's incredible to see how the product's evolved over the years of just like, we're getting your data into a spreadsheet to this empowering you with all of this capability to really build this awareness. So I'm going to do a demo here of, thinking about how we build the strong financial foundation, how we develop that awareness, looking at some of the tools and features that Ashley talked about, getting our budget ready for 2026, and then, kind of what we've been working on, maybe what's coming next, just depending on time. So, all right, so let's close this one out and we are going to get going here. I am in the Tiller console in just kind of a test account that I often use where I have some data mocked up in a spreadsheet here. So Tiller's working great in this scenario. This is our happy path, right? So we've got our foundation template here. We've got our transaction data from about the last 12 months. It's all categorized. We've spent the time categorizing it over the year plus that we've been with Tiller, or perhaps we got started a few months ago and we took the effort and the energy to go back and categorize those past transactions that we were able to pull in. Maybe we had AutoCAT help with that, which hopefully we'll have a little bit of time to talk about what's new there. But essentially, we've got the last 12 months of data categorized in this example data set. All the data is flowing in for us nicely. Our bank connections are working well. It's all smooth, right? So the things that are built into the foundation template that are going to help us look back at what happened over 2025 and build that awareness are a few of the built-in templates. The simplest one to kind of start with here is the spending trends sheet. And this is just a quick and simple overview of, you've got some spending analysis at the top. You can see your kind of net worth. How are you doing with your balances based on the accounts that are connected to the sheet? The cash flow piece, that was one of those questions that we wanted to answer as we're building awareness, right? We can see that right at the top, total income minus total expenses. This is a very simple definition of cash flow. And we can see in this example, this person had around $10,000 worth of cash flow. So that's money that could have went towards savings. We can scroll down and get some insights about where money is going for particular categories if we're just interested in seeing, how much money we earned and how much money we spent. not really thinking about budgets yet, just looking at the pure actuals here, we can get that right in the spending trends. And you may notice that, in my spending and trends sheet, I've got my groups here in this like bright blue because it's a spreadsheet and it's customizable. I customize that because I want to stand out. I want to see like how much am I spending in each of these groups. So it's just an example of how flexible it is and how it can empower you to make this type of analysis and building this awareness easier. So I can see right off the bat, like this discretionary group got close to $10,000 of spending there. This living group close to 15,000, which makes sense. Like that's my primary group, right? Living. Those are mostly necessary expenses. So spending trends is really quick and simple if you just want to get this overview of the last 12 months. But you can also change the time frame here to look at whatever time frame makes sense to you. We're just looking at, the last years. We're reflecting on that awareness and what we may want to make changes for in the next year. The other one that's really great that's built right into the foundation template is the yearly budget. So if I flip over to this tab, it's all based on my actuals, and then it's looking at the budget targets that I set in the category sheet here for 2025 for each of my categories, and then it's comparing those, and it's telling me was I over or under. So this is really great to get the snapshot of the entire year, starting January 2025. This is a 12-month view, so it's those 12 months essentially of my budgets and what's available. So if it's red and negative, that means I went over in that category. So this helps me understand if I'm interested in budgeting, how did I do against my budget over these last 12 months? And so at the end of the year, that's what I love about this. It's like I really get to see how I did. It's hard in any given month when I'm looking like month to month, okay, I went over, like what's going to happen for the rest of the year? I don't know, but like when it's at the end of the year, I can really paint this picture of like what was going on different in my finances. And so in this example here, we can see the areas where, there was overages was like shopping, for example. In the discretionary group, travel also had a pretty high total that was over the budgeted amount for the year. Maybe that budget number wasn't right. Maybe it was too low and I should have budgeted more, but it's just information. I'm building this awareness. I don't have to judge myself or, get too concerned about it now. I'm just like trying to build the information. Another one that is medical and dental. Maybe, I didn't budget any. That was a mistake, right? That should have had a budget item there. We can talk a little bit too about like how do we set these budgets as we're thinking about 2026 when we get into that portion, but this is just building that awareness. So I think just at the year level, this is great. You can scroll to the right. You can see any particular month where you were over in that month. One of the newer features that we built this year is another template that helps you visualize your spending and track the category, actuals in a different view is in the Tiller Money Feeds add-on in the templates section. So if I go ahead and I launch that, we launched a simple P&L template this year. And when you hear P&L, you often are thinking about business. Like that's a business template, right? I actually find it incredibly helpful for building this awareness, even though I'm not using it in a budgeting context. It's just a very interesting way to visualize what happened with my data. So in the sidebar here, when I choose browse, I can view a list of templates that I have installed, I don't have installed, manage the ones I have installed if they need updates, things like that. But I can go down here, find the simple P&L, and I can go ahead and install it, give that a few seconds to install into my Google Sheet. And then we'll be able to dive into the spending there in this new template that we built this year. So give that a second. The other way, just while we're waiting for that to install, is, oh, of course, never fails when you're doing the demo live for hundreds of people that the installation fails. Let me try to restart it. And if it doesn't work, we'll have the link in the resources and you can check it out yourself. But it's pretty neat. So just while we're waiting for that to load up in the transaction sheet here, part of this other thing about building awareness is like, okay, that's great. I spent a lot of money on shopping, right? Like I saw that just from the spending trends sheet and even the monthly budget. I was over, or the yearly budget, I was over my spending for shopping, what I had budgeted. And all that, that's great information. But what does it actually mean? Like, what was it on? What was all that shopping on? Like, is that too generic for my financial life and the way that I want to think about things? So Let me get this going here. So what you can do is you can filter your transaction sheet. Let's see if it'll let me do this while it's installing. It's working this time, which is good. But I don't want to break things while it's trying to install. Let's just try it. Hopefully it doesn't break anything. All right. So we're gonna clear it out and then just gonna search for shopping, right? So we're gonna, oh, here we go. It's taking over. It's supposed to do that. It's supposed to like activate the template when you get it installed. Okay, yay, success. All right. So simple P&L. Last 12 months, but similar, there's some cool features with the date range reporting here, so you can like really customize. It's pretty neat. But we're just gonna look at the last 12 months. And it's similar to the spending trends in that I get the total for the reporting range, but then I also get each month. And I just find this to be a much easier view to look at the actuals than the yearly budget. The yearly budget, it's like, if I want to look at the actuals for each month, like I have to scroll, 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 right? So the simple P&L makes it really simple to just look at the actuals for each month. I can also get my cash flow over time, which is really helpful. And it's like, okay, it dipped down here in these last like few months. Like what's up with that? Like where was my money going? What was happening? Was I earning less? Was I spending more? Like it just helps kind of bring more questions that then you can kind of dive into to help you spot overages, areas where you could cut spending to save more, to plan for debt. So if I kind of dig into that, so in the transaction sheet, I was kind of like, shopping, like what is that? I want to build more awareness about shopping. So if I just filter the category column, and this heads up, you're going to see this when you create a filter, it's fine. Just say don't show for 5 minutes. It's just protecting row one. So I see here shopping, kind of looking through like, what is all this shopping? Does this really like, is it really shopping? Is like some of it gifts? Like, what is it? How do I want to break it out? The first thing I spot here is that this like toy of Greenville, this is not a toy store. This is Toyota. So this actually isn't shopping. This should be like other. Maybe I was just moving too fast that day when I was categorizing, or maybe like AI suggests our LLM just got it wrong, So this is where doing this reflection, like digging into your data, helps you uncover the story of your money when like life's moving really fast and you're so busy and it's hard to catch these little errors. Like it's good to do this sort of like combing through. So now when I go back and I look at my yearly budget, for example, and I look at that shopping category, it's way down. It's not the spending overs like I thought it was. That was actually like a good expense that needed to happen for maintaining my vehicle to work really well. Some of the other ones, like, we can dig into those as we talk about like changes that we may want to make, but that's just one example of where you can kind of deepen your awareness and deepen the information that you're getting out of Tiller to help you understand what's going on with your money. Um, I think the other thing is like, the other one that was kind of over that seemed like a lot was travel. And so if I look at this, I look at these transactions here and I think about what they were, first of all, I spot like some of them these are work related trips, right? So like maybe those need to use a different category, like a reimbursements, because I'm being reimbursed for that stuff. But otherwise, like when I see how much I've spent here and I see like what these descriptions are, like these are almost like little memories or moments in time that represent some experience that I have. So when I see that amount of money was spent on travel, how does it make me feel? Right? Is it a joyful feeling? Like, wow, I got to have these experiences. Or is it like, oh, maybe I need to like cut back on my travel spending. So I really think, and there's no judgment in that, right? It's just like observing like that feeling that comes in. It's almost this like mindfulness about your money. It's like, how does it make you feel that you spent that much? That's part of the awareness, right? It's like that feeling that comes up is just a part of that awareness that helps you decide, like, how do you want to make changes? How do you want to see your financial dreams realized? And as we talked about before, it is in those trade-offs, right? For me, it's like I love spending money on experiences and not things, right? So to me, it's like, yes, like I spend a lot of money on travel. That's awesome. And I have some cleanup to do because it's not totally right. And so that's where we get into this idea of how does this help empower us for the future? So we spotted some of those overages. We spotted some areas where, I think another one example that I want to talk about was like restaurants is here in the discretionary. Like it's actually not that bad. I think I was like looking at a different data set when I was thinking about this, but definitely areas where you can identify overages. Where do you want to cut spending and move that money somewhere else because you are making trade-offs, right? So as we think about getting ready for the new year, in this case, I like to budget, right? So how do I get my budget ready for 2026? If you're in the foundation template and you're in the category sheet, right now, you've only got budget columns out through December of 2025. What happens when 2026 rolls around? This really depends on your preference. There's a few things you can do. You can go to the console and you can just create a whole new sheet for 2026 and start completely fresh. New set of categories, like it's going to fill in all of your historical data, but you can just clear out the rows before 2026 if you don't want to see that data in your spreadsheet. You can even unlink the 2025 spreadsheet from the settings area here. And that sheet's going to stay in your Google Drive, or if you're using Excel, it's going to stay wherever you stored it, OneDrive or locally or wherever. Like it's your sheet, it's your data. You get to keep it. So don't worry about unlinking it. It's fine. If you don't want to start a new sheet, you like your categories, or maybe you're going to tweak some, but you're just like, I want to have all my historical data. There's a couple things you can do. So if you want to keep your historical budgets, you want to be able to kind of look back on 2025 budgets here and make sure all your budget numbers stay the way they are for 2025. You just add more budget columns to the category sheet, which I'll demo in just a second. Same thing with the yearly budget. It's basically like a lens of like any 12 months at a time. So that's the advantage of keeping the budgets in there, persisting your historical budgets. If you don't care to persist those historical budgets, you can just overwrite this 2025 with 2026 and boom, you're done. But then you don't get your 2025 budget history. All your actuals are still there. Doesn't affect like your actual spending or categorized transactions. It's just affecting your budget. So you see now I'm still in 2025 here. And then in my budget column, there's no budgets because I just overwrote those with 2026. So that's the fastest, right? But we're going to set this back to 2025. If you want to add a 2026 budget, and I think in my own personal sheet, this is not my personal sheet, this is a demo sheet. In my own personal sheet, I have probably 5 years worth of budgets in there. So that means I have like 12 times whatever, five, what is that? Like 60 or something? Like 60 columns of like budgets because I've just used the same sheet for a really long time. So it's extensible, right? You can keep going. So all you have to do to add the additional 12 budget months to your Google Sheet is, and I'll pull up in Excel and I'll show this in Excel quickly because it's a little bit different. For Google Sheets, you'll select all 12, and all you do to select them is you click on the column letter, you hold the Shift key, and then you click the last column letter. In this case, it's P because I just have the 1 year. And then you'll just right click and you'll choose Insert 12 columns right. That's just going to insert those 12 columns to the right. And then you're going to take this last cell for the last budget month and see how it's a formula in the formula bar here? We're just going to drag that formula across to the right. So I'm just, when I get the crosshairs, when I hover properly over this little blue circle, which kind of blends into our Tiller blue background here, but we get those crosshairs and then we're just going to drag to the right. And then we've got our 12 months for 2026. Now, as far as budgets go, you can easily do the same thing with your budgets. I'm just going to go all the way to the bottom because these cells have formulas as well. They're just referencing the previous month. Most of them do. Some of them might be one-offs. But I'm just going to select all because I want to make sure all my empty rows also have formulas in case I were to add like a bunch more categories. So I just do that same thing, drag that circle over, and then boom, I've got all of my budgets for the whole year pulled over to the right for all of my 12 budget months for 2026. So now when I go to the yearly budget and I flip to 2026, which you'll want to do when 2026 starts, or if you're in planning mode, you can flip back and forth. Then I see I've got no actuals, but I've got all my budgets. Got my entire budget for those 12 months. So it's super easy to get it set up. For Excel, that is going to take just 1 second. Let me get that open. I didn't have it queued up properly. I'm sorry. Somebody, play the Jeopardy tune in the background for me while I'm doing this. I like to make jokes. It just keeps it light and fun, and then it's not like this like weird silence while Heather like gets her act together. Okay, so here is Excel. And so we'll do this. We don't have to do the same thing here. We don't have to like insert those 12 columns because Excel has an infinite number of columns. What we do need to do though is we need to unhide. You just right click any tab at the bottom and choose unhide. And then you're going to unhide this new year tab. And this is just something we did to make it easy for you to get the months into the next, like for the next year. So you're just copying and pasting the row for the year. So here we go. We just copy this and then we're going to paste it to the right. So you'll notice, if you're familiar with Excel, you'll notice that it's not in this like table view, doesn't have these green cells, but Excel's pretty magic in that like I just paste it and voila, it knows what to do. And my table only goes to here, but just for those who are like, why isn't it green? If I just like add one here, I think like, let me see, yoga. Yeah, so then it just keeps adding it, right? It knows how to like add additional spots to the table. So that's how you do it for Excel. It's much easier in Excel, honestly. Um, so back to our Google Sheet, just because this is where I have the data mocked up. Sorry, Excel folks, like I'm a Google Sheets person. I try to like show the necessary things in Excel, but like I much prefer Google Sheets. That's just my preference. All right, so we've got our budgets, or we've got the column set up, we've got the budgets from last year, but that's not really the same as like what needs to change, right? This is just exactly as it was. Based on that awareness we built, what are we going to do about it? Do we feel like we need to make changes? Are there overages where we want to make that trade-off and put that money towards savings or put that money toward debt? One thing I think is really helpful that I don't think I've talked a lot about in this webinar is customizing categories, and are your categories really working for you? We saw that example of shopping and I didn't feel like it was quite working for me. I felt like it's a little bit too generic. That was just one of the default categories that came with the template. And at that time, let's say I just didn't want to spend the time to like break it out. Another one was travel. Like some of those should have been reimbursements. That one's probably an easier one to demo just because I have to think about it a little bit less. So I'm going to do that one. But let's say I want to add a new category and kind of clean up some of my transaction data because this is the right time of year to do that, right? Like you're starting fresh, it's a new year, you can think about things differently. You don't want to quite start over in a new sheet, but you want to just make some modifications to how things are organized. So let's add a reimbursements. I don't think I have that. It's going to tell me if I do. So this is going to be work, because it's work related. Doesn't really need to be a budget. It's kind of like a transfer, honestly. So maybe transfer type is better because it's going to come back on my paycheck, right? So I've got the new category in there, right? But what if, what happens to those transactions? Like, how do they get fixed? So here I just go through and I find the ones that need to be reimbursement. Like, I think this one maybe was for a work trip. Maybe this one also work trip. Simple, right? The shopping example is a little bit more tricky because like I don't like the term shopping, right? So I want to change it. So let's say I go to shopping and I want this to be like household because like let's say just most of it was household, some of it was like gifts or whatever. So I change it from shopping to household. Now what happens? Oh, I've already got that one. Sorry. On the fly, I'm thinking like, what is it? Let's say like clothing and stuff. I don't know. Like just need something that's unique because it's yelling at me because I had a duplicate. So when I go back in my transaction sheet and I head over to the shopping category, and it's gonna warn me because it's already been 5 minutes, I get all these errors like, oh no, what happened? This is what happens when you change the name of a category. It's really easy to fix, right? So we can just quickly say, what did I say? Clothing and stuff, right? So that one's fixed. I can just use that same little circle, quick fill, drag it all down. But, some of it is not clothing and stuff. Like this is like gifts, right? So I can go through and I can figure out like, how do I want to adjust this? How do I want to think about this category schema differently for this new year? So that's just a quick example. All right. Building a plan, right? Like let's say we've got all these insights and we're ready to build our plan beyond just like changing up our categories a little bit. One last thing before I move on from that. We changed it here. There's one other place you would need to change it. If you have AutoCAD rules, and any of them were using the shopping category, you would also need to update your AutoCAD rules because they're going to have the same error. So just a side note on that. Um, Building a plan. So the way I thought about trying to help figure out like budget plans, right? It's like, I don't know if my budget's right or not. Maybe when I got started, like I did the best I could to just estimate. Now I have all this awareness because I've been using Tiller for a year or spent the time categorizing the data. How do I really figure out like what are appropriate budget targets? I think it comes down to two things. I think it comes down to what are your goals? So, like, are you saving enough for the future? Are you budgeting for debt? Where there are overages in some categories, can you stop spending as much in those and put it towards other things, assuming that you were cash flow positive? And so in this situation, in this demo sheet, it was cash flow positive. So there was like money that was could be put aside toward other things, right? And that's not everyone's situation. Sometimes you have overages and like you're still, struggling. And that's okay. And this is not about judging yourself if that's in your situation, if that's your situation. It's just building the awareness to help you build a plan, right? So the simple P&L is kind of neat because there's all this space out to the right. Now, just bear in mind that you can do 24 months, right? I don't have 2024 data in here. So if you do what I'm about to suggest, just keep in mind that this template does expand out to the right. It can expand out to the right for up to five, this is just by year, but like those 24 months. So just keep that in mind. But for this 12 month, I want to just get the average. And this is what's so cool about a spreadsheet. And it goes back to that flexibility is like I can just do a quick formula like equals average, and then I can just average all of these, right? Now, salaries, like they generally, they're about the same, but like that's my average. So it's really most helpful for spending. So I can do the same thing. I can actually just copy this formula and Google Sheets knows that like I just want to sum this row. I'm not trying to sum that row I just copied it from. And I can use this quick fill handle and I can drag it all the way down. And then I start getting these averages for my spending. And I could use that for my budget, or I can just look at that and be like, what is this? Home improvement. Okay, $126 on average. It's not every month, right? So maybe that doesn't make sense, but I've averaged it out over the whole year. So that's, just keep that in mind. Like you might not want to spend that much every month. You can pick and choose. Each month can be different. Let's try to find one that's maybe going to have some amount of consistency. So like restaurants, for example, on average spending 180 bucks. Like it's up and down month over month, right? But on average it's 180. Like how does that feel to me? Is that too much? Is that too little? It really is going to depend on what are my values. If I really value that as a date night with my husband, then yeah, great. Average 180 bucks. Like maybe it's more if I'm in the financial situation where I can afford that. In this situation, yes, I have positive cash flow for the year. So like that's probably okay if it's aligned with my values. If I was in a negative cash flow situation, I might need to say no. Like I just absolutely can't eat out at restaurants anymore. And that's going to be really hard for some period of time, but it's a trade-off I'm making to help me with future goals that I have. So another good example is maybe like groceries, same thing, 390. So maybe I want to do 400, maybe 390 is great. From there, I can then start plugging those into those budget targets for 2026. Another neat thing, it's in a spreadsheet. I can hide these columns. In my personal sheet, I don't hide them, I group them because sometimes I want to be able to like quickly see them again without going through all the clicks of hiding and unhiding. This is just one click, two clicks. So highly recommend grouping them. But we can see like, okay, for groceries, I have 400. So that's about average what I was spending. So I'm going to leave that. Restaurants, where's restaurants? Is this alphabetical or what? We can make it alphabetical because it's a spreadsheet. All right, so there we go. Restaurants, 200, 180. Yeah, that's great. Travel, what were we doing for travel? We didn't have anything, right? So let's go back to our simple P&L and let's find the travel. That was in discretionary. We had 159. We had some big months. It looks like August was a bigger month. So I think just thinking about it in that context, like this is a good example where like you're maybe not going to be spending a consistent amount on travel every month, but like in June, like maybe I'm going to spend $1,000 on travel because it's my husband's birthday and we go on a trip every year, so on and so forth. So if I set this for 1,000 in June, let's see what happens. oh, now I've got 1,000 for all the subsequent months. We don't really want that, right? So we just zero it out in that next month and then it zeroes it out, right? So you can do that. You can set the budgets for each individual month. So we've got that awareness, we've built the plan. Let's see. A couple other things I'll mention before I move on to just kind of talking about the core of Tiller. A couple little things I want to demo and just talk about that we've like invested a lot in this year. The first thing is like part of the plan is not just like budgeting, tracking, like making changes to your categories. We have some tools that we've built in the Tiller Money Feeds add-on to help you with some of the bigger plans that you maybe need to be considering depending on what your financial situation is. And one of those is savings goals. And so we do have a template for helping you track your savings goals, set those savings goals, and map them directly to your account balances. So in the browse section here, I'm just going to show them. I'm not going to install them because the install, as we saw last time, can be hit or miss. I blame it on Zoom screen sharing. So we go here, savings goals. And so you can see it's just a way that you can add it in. You can set the goal, choose the account that is assigned to that particular goal. We recommend it be like an actual savings account and not your checking account just because money is moving in and out of the checking account all the time. And it just helps you track your progress against that goal. The other one, if you're hopefully you're in a position to save, but sometimes you're not, and you're in a position of like, let me get out of debt, and that's totally valid. We have the debt payoff planner. And it's kind of the reverse of the savings goals. It's similar in that you're like you're tying an account to a specific payoff amount, to a specific like overall monthly budget amount that you're putting toward debt to help you figure out based on the debts that you have, the interest rates, the minimum monthly payments, and the monthly budget payoff amount that you think you can make toward your debt, which ideally is more than the sum of your minimum monthly payments. How quickly could you pay off that debt? And you can model different things. Like if you're able to put more towards the debt every month, then you can pay it off faster, right? And it can help you model like how much faster can I pay it off if I put more towards it. And so that's where the sort of ties all this like I'm building awareness, I see where there are overages, I'm overspending, but I have a positive cash flow. Can I put more of that towards debt? And how much faster am I going to be able to pay off that debt? So definitely recommend checking that out. So all of that, everything I've talked about for the most part here will be in the resources with links to specific help guides. And then of course the recording, you'll get access to the link to this recording tomorrow via email. All right. So thinking about the core of Tiller, right? Like when I started this, I was talking about this happy path, right? Of like all my bank data is flowing in perfectly. My bank connections work perfectly. Everything's great. Now we know that that is not the case for everyone. We know that not everyone uses Chase, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Capital One, like those huge banks, right? We know that there's those tiny credit unions out there. We know that there's just this, the one-off, somewhat big regional banks, but they're not the Chases and the Wells Fargo of the world, right? So that's where the banking aggregation comes in. And that is one of the core things that we do is like pulling your data from the bank. And we do that via third-party data providers. So like you'll notice on the console here, this Barclays connection is connected via Yodlee. That's one of our data partners. This one's connected via Yodlee as well. And then I have one here that's connected via Plaid. And so if you've been with Tiller for a long time, this might be news to you. You might be hearing about this for the first time, right? Tiller has multiple aggregators. What? Like I've only ever known about Yodlee. So we invested in this. We actually started investing in this like well over a year ago. We're at the point now where we're introducing Plaid to our newest users. We're making sure that it's the best it can possibly be. We're intending to work on the experience where if you've been with us for a long time and you want to try the other aggregator because your tiny credit union doesn't work well with Yodlee, we want to get you there. There's more work that we have to do before we can share both aggregators with everyone broadly because we want it to be a good experience. And right now, you have the same bank connected, bank login, like same accounts connected via both. You're going to see both on the console, right? And we don't want you to end up with duplicates or create a mess or anything. So if this is news to you, like know that we're doing our best to like get it out to everyone, but we're also being careful because we don't want to create a mess. And in some situations, maybe we're sharing it if like things aren't working really well for you with Yodlee for a particular institution. But we're excited about this development because it is really at the heart of what we do. And it's really, really hard. Like, we work with these third-party aggregators and we don't have control over if the connection breaks. Like, the aggregator has to work with the bank to get the connection up and running. And so that puts us in this weird spot of we're offering this service, but we have no control over if the connections break or not. And bank data aggregation is just hard. As more institutions move to this OAuth-based connection, it'll get better and more reliable and more stable. But the smaller institutions, it's going to take them longer. All the big institutions, as I mentioned, Chase, Capital One, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, they're all already on this OAuth connection, and it's pretty solid. Smaller banks are going there. It's just going to take time. And so that's the big thing is like getting multiple aggregators up. How do we get access to those all of the aggregators that we have to all of our users? The other thing was the improving the manual workflows, right? Like sometimes like they're just not going to work with an aggregator. And there's not a lot that we can do that because we don't do about that because we don't build the direct connections, but how can we make a great experience when you've just got that one credit union that doesn't work, all your other ones work great, but you need a workflow that's not, copy paste, move columns around, like stuff like that. So a couple things that we did this year are we introduced this manual accounts feature on the console. You might be familiar with this feature in the sidebar and Tiller Money feeds. That one still works. We've still got some work to do to kind of consolidate them and make sure that those manual accounts in your sheet will work with them, like kind of sync them. But for now, you can add manual accounts here. Let's say a great example of this we hear from people all the time is I want to track my real estate investments as assets, right? So, let's just say I have a house, enter some, my account number, and this is real estate. And, let's say it's worth $300,000. Is that right? Is that enough zeros? Yes, I think. I'm going to add the manual account and it's going to show up here under my manual accounts. So now I can track my real estate value or any other assets or any account manually. So I got the balances there. If I need to update the balances, I can. I can link this to my spreadsheet and it's going to fill the data in for that real estate asset there. Along with this, we also introduced this import CSV feature this year. And this goes really nicely with the manual accounts feature because if you have an account that won't connect via one of the aggregators and you want to track the transactions as well, not just the balances, you can use the import CSV workflow to, upload your transactions for that account and get it to fill into your spreadsheet without all of the, like moving the columns around and the manual work it was to get CSVs into your spreadsheet. I'm not going to demo that right now just for the sake of time, but that was something that we spent a good bit of time on this year just trying to improve those workflows for folks. And let's see if there was anything else. Yeah, and then I think the last thing that we're working really hard on is improving the fills, right? Improving this concept of like there's the refresh, the bank and the aggregator go and they grab the data, or the aggregator goes and grabs the data from the bank and pulls it in. That's the refresh. But then there's this fill step, right? And right now you do that with Tiller Money Feeds in the sidebar. And so you can click the button to manually fill it if you're on the console and you do a manual refresh and the data comes in, you're going to have to click the fill button, right? To get it right away, or you have to wait like however many hours until the next autofill. With Excel, like you have to click the fill button. That's the only way to get the data in there. And this caused a lot of confusion for users. We also found that in the sidebar, like the fills weren't that reliable after you had a lot of data in the sheet. And this is like years worth of data and or tons of complex dashboards. Like there's tons of different templates in here and some of the community ones they're very complex. And so it just kind of hogs the spreadsheet's processor and then the fill, like it was having trouble for some users in some situations. And because that's the core of what we do, we need the fills to be solid. And so we've invested a good bit of time. Can we get the fills to be more solid in the sidebar? And finally, we're just like, we're just going to make the best possible way to fill sheets. And so we haven't broadly released it, but we are working on a new service called Direct Fills, and that's going to allow you there's no sidebar needed for the fill. It's just going to refresh, data fills in right away. So your sheet will always be up to date without your intervention needed. and it'll just be much more reliable and stable. And so we're pretty close on that, but not broadly available yet. If any of you out there are beta users, like thank you so much for the beta testing. If you're interested in joining our beta program, like just write into chat. Sorry, Tulani, but I don't know how else to share with people. Actually, I do have an opt-in form for this. That's separate than the beta. Like you can actually opt in to help us like test these new direct fills without having to be a part of the beta group. So I'm going to put that link in the chat. So anybody that's interested in testing out the direct fills can do so if you're not already having access to that. And then Tulay, I'm going to let you get ready with the questions, and we'll start taking those Q&A questions just here in 1 second. All right. Because that was everything I had to demo. I hope that that was helpful and that I didn't miss anything. Okay, that's the link to the form to opt in to the direct fills. All right, what you got for me, Tulani?
Um, well, Clint wrote in asking, are there any changes made to the 2026 Tiller template? So I think overall, just trying to understand if there are major changes. We also have Anuj who wrote in asking if they needed to, they have a 5-year-old Google Sheet and they're wondering if somehow get starting a new sheet will give them new features. So I don't know, maybe if you can generally speak on that.
Yeah, those are great questions. So as far as like things in the foundation template for 2026, there's not anything new per se. We will update, let's see what happens. Yeah. So we will update the template here with the categories set to 2026 shortly. Like I was thinking about definitely doing that before Christmas, just so the new people that come in, like they get the 2026 months automatically. But as far as like, you know, features that will be launched in 2026 or ready in 2026 as far as like the template goes, like nothing planned right now. As far as the question about a Google Sheet that's, from 5 years ago, um, there's no reason to start a new spreadsheet unless you're experiencing any of those performance issues that I talked about, where you have like a ton of data in there. And that's also going to depend, like the ton of data is relative, right? Like spreadsheets with 20,000 transaction rows in it and 10,000 balance history rows in it, but that has really simple dashboards, the standard, foundation template stuff is probably fine. Like, I don't think I have to quite have 20,000 rows in mine, but I have like, I have about 5 years of data in my personal sheet and it's fine. I don't have a performance issue. As far as like features, like starting a new sheet because of features in the template itself, there's no need to do that because most of the features like are contained in the sidebar. So like the split, the add transactions, like that's all going to work fine in the spreadsheet that you have. Like that all gets updated dynamically via code pushes and stuff like that. Like has nothing to do with the template. And any of the templates that you have in your sheet, you can manage them using the sidebar as well. So like if you open your sidebar and you click on that manage button like I just did, it's going to filter it to ones that you have installed. And if any of these have like, I think it's like a orange like exclamation icon or something, that would be an indication that's out of date and you would just want to update it because it means like maybe we fixed a bug or we made an enhancement to it. And so you can get your templates updated that way. The only thing to be careful about is it'll have an update button instead of a restore button. The only thing to be careful about is like if you've made customizations to the template functionality itself, like a good example is the debt payoff template. If for some reason there was an update for that one, when you click restore here, you're probably going to want to archive it because if you override it, you're going to lose all of that data that you input into the sheet, like your interest rates and your minimum monthly payments and things like that. So just be careful. But if there's no like, if it's a pure visualization sheet, then you can just override it. And then you just may want to explore like what are the other templates that are available and add some in that seem interesting or helpful or useful to you. So it's very modular. You don't have to start in a new sheet, I think, unless you're having like a performance problem. But I would just be wary of like if you start adding a bunch of stuff to test it, it can start to slow the sheet down. So if you find that there are things that you're not using, then just delete them. Like delete the tabs. You can just click the little arrow here and just click the delete. So good question.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions asking for either the repeated demo for a few of the changes or 2026 related updates you demonstrated on the categories sheet. So Scott asked, can you show how to hide the 2025 budget categories? And then Cecile asked to rather, Dawn asked if you can show again how to add the other 12 months
Mm,
for the categories. And then since we are only going to update the template in maybe another couple of days or a week or so, can we quickly show how to add an item for a new year or yeah, for a new year on the monthly and annual budget sheets?
got it. So I think what you're asking is, so the first one was like hiding the 2025 budget columns. Is that
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a couple ways to do that, and that's just selecting all the columns. And I have these grouped. I'm just going to ungroup them just for the sake of the demo. So I've got them all selected, and you can either just right click and hide, which is totally fine way to do it as well. But if you want to be able to kind of like easily view and hide them, I would recommend grouping them. So you can choose group columns E through P, and then that's going to add this like grouping mechanism. And then you can just plus, minus, that's quick and easy. And then I think the next question you had was about adding the 12
Yeah.
columns to the right. Okay.
Hmm.
So let me just for the sake of this, I'm going to delete these. Okay, so then for that, you just select all 12 budget months. And to select them, you're just selecting the column letter and then you're holding shift. Select the last column letter. So now I've got all 12 selected. Right click and choose insert 12 columns right. So I've got 12 empty columns now. And then I just select this December 2025 or the last month cell and then drag the formula because it's a formula up here. I'm just dragging this across to the right. So now I've got those 12 months for 2026. And then the last thing I did was I just selected all of the cells in that last month and did the same thing. Just drag them across because most of them are also formulas, just referencing the previous cell. So it's just dragging the formulas across. And then the last question I think you asked was like getting like if I'm just brand new, right? And it's set to 2025 right now, how do I just go ahead and change it to 2026? Is that right?
Well, you can do that. Sorry. The other one was relating to the budget sheets. So the monthly and
Mm,
yearly, if you
mhm.
want to see, if let's say you've already set up your 2026 budget figures, but you need
Yes,
to view
got
to
it.
have the 2026 views.
Okay, I see. Yeah, I didn't quite understand. So that one's really easy. You just change the year to 2026 here in the top drop down for the year. So now I can see my 2026 budgets. Same thing in the yearly. We're just going to change that. I already did, I think, in the demo, but yeah, you just select the year here and you can go back and forth.
Have we updated the templates though to have the 2026, or for right now, people need to do it manually? Like if they're only seeing up to 2025.
Um,
Is it also it's
okay.
already been updated?
Yeah, I mean, the
Oh,
latest version of the template. So if you're only seeing up until 2025, it's probably because you have had that sheet for a long time.
okay.
Um, because I believe the latest version goes all the way
Okay.
to 2030. And so
Mhm.
if you're in that situation, that's also pretty easy to fix. You can just actually click this edit button. Sometimes you don't want to click this edit button, like in the categories, like in the transactions sheet category column, like clicking this edit button is not going to help you. But in this case, it's fine. And this is just a data validation rule. You can just add another item, 2031, which is not what that is. There we go. So now we see 2031. So that's easy to fix too. It's just updating the data validation. Okay, what do we got next?
We have a question from, and excuse me if I get this wrong, from Jagdish, who's asking, who said, you shared a way to add a new category, but what is the best way to remove a category that is no longer applicable or used in the new year?
Oh, that's a great question. So there's a couple ways you can, if you don't want to have to clean up all your transaction data and recategorize things, because what's going to happen, similar to when I changed from shopping to clothing and stuff, like if you just delete a category out of your category sheet, you're going to get all those data validation errors in your transaction sheet, those little red, triangles in the top right of the cell. So if you don't want to have to go and clean up all of the transactions and recategorize them using a new category, you can just hide from reports. So let's see. I'll just, for example, like I'll just hide the clothing and stuff. But to just show what happens, simple P&L, clothing and stuff, we see it here. And then if we go and hide it using the hide from reports, boom, goes away. So that's the easiest way, is to just hide it from your reports. And then that way, if you ever decide like, oh, how much did I spend on that last year? Like you can actually easily like figure it out, but it's not cluttering up your views. So also not going to show up on either of the budget tabs. Like that's a pretty hide from reports. If you mark it as hide, it's pretty universal in all the templates. Can't say that for all the community templates, but any templates we build, we respect that hide from reports where it just doesn't show. Otherwise, you could just delete the category, just delete the row, and then you're just going to want to go through your transactions and recategorize that stuff to get rid of those errors. Usually the errors like aren't going to cause problems. There may be some situations where like it could cause an error, like if you're using some function of the sidebar, like it can break that, but I don't know anything specific offhand. The stuff I've tested recently, like I wasn't breaking it, but hopefully that helps.
Okay, we have a request here from Charles. Can you show again how you filtered the transactions to highlight shopping expenses?
Yeah, so that is pretty simple. So let's see. Let me just kind of start from a clean slate here. Okay, so by default, don't think that the transaction sheet has a filter enabled. And so to turn on the filter, the easiest way to do it and the recommended way is to just select all of the data in the transaction sheet. And you can do that by clicking this little gray rectangle in the top right above row 1 to the left of column A. So that's selecting all the data. And then you can just click the filter, create a filter button here in the toolbar. And so that's just turning on the filtering capability for each column in the transaction sheet. Then from there, you'll just click just the filter icon here, and then you can just clear the selections. Like right now, everything is selected by default, indicated by the check mark. Click clear, and then we'll just do the clothing and stuff. I search for it because I want to select that one. That's just the fastest way to find it. So clothing and stuff, click OK, and then it filters it down. Now, I kind of glazed over this in the demo, but you probably did see when I was like started messing with the filter and all that, I got that heads up, you're about to edit something that's protected, blah, blah, blah. There's that checkbox, just don't show for 5 minutes. It's totally fine to make those edits if you know what you're doing. So just don't be scared off by that pop-up that you get. All right, what's next?
We have a question from Benjamin saying, if I set up a manual account in the spreadsheet a year ago, do I still add a new manual account for the same account to Tiller? I'm not clear on their question, but can we just briefly talk about the difference between manual accounts created in the sidebar and in the console?
Yes, that is a great question. I think I understand what they mean. So if you had created the manual account here in the sidebar first, this should be pretty quick. Let's see, test, 1, 2, 3, 4, test, $1. Is it gonna work? No, I have to make sure I'm filling in all the fields. So I'm updating the balance, it's adding the account. This is just for this specific spreadsheet. So if I go look on the console now, I still just have that one, right? And so the question is like, I've added this one in, I've had it for years, I've got a ton of history, and do I have to recreate it? Yes and no. So the best way to sort of deal with it, if you want to start taking advantage of the manual accounts being managed on the console, you don't have to right now. Like our hope is that we can kind of like at some point be able to automatically connect them for you so that you don't have to do these manual steps that I'm about to quickly talk through, and this will be our last question just because we're at time. But you would want to go ahead and add it here. And so we can say like test 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's say that balance is actually $2 and this is test institution. So I can add this manual account. So now I've got that account. It's a second time. If I go and I fill it in, I'm going to add test, and then I'm going to go back and check for updates. Should have at least the balance update there. If I fill it in, let's see what happens. Should get it here on the balances sheet. So there it is, test. I've got both of them. Yes, because one I added via the sidebar and one I added in the console. So then if I go into the balance history sheet and I filter by the test institution, I'm going to get both of them. And so the difference you'll see is that the one that you added via the sidebar has this manual prepend. But technically these are the same account, right? Like I've just re-added it on the console. And so what you're going to want to do to basically reconcile them into the same account before we have this feature automated for you is just take the account ID from the entry that you created from the console and paste it into all of the entries that have this manual prepend that are for that specific account. And that's important if you have more than one manual account that you've been tracking in the sidebar. So now if I just go and I add it this way, then they're consolidated. They're considered the same account now from like a tiller perspective. And this is just so you can retain your history, right, for that manual account. But then the one thing to be aware of is that you won't be able to update that account in the sidebar anymore. And it's not registering that because I have to reload it. But from now on, you'll have to go and update the balance in the console down here under update balance. And that's the other thing that we like intend to build is like if you'll still be able to update the balance in the sidebar and it'll just sync back to like the database, the back end, not just local to the spreadsheet like it used to be. So now if I go in here, it shouldn't load the account because so now it doesn't recognize that there's a manual account because this is looking for accounts that are prepended with that word manual. So hopefully that explains it. Tulani, was that a thumbs up on your from you?
Yeah, thumbs and toes up.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, that is all the time that we have. Thank you all so much for joining. We really appreciate it. This has been fun. Thank you, Ashley and Tony, for being great co-hosts. Don't forget, we'll send out that email tomorrow with a link to the recording and the resources. Appreciate all the great questions and hope you all have happy holidays and a happy new year. See y'all.
Happy holidays.